Welcome to Life with Strings Attached. I'm your host, Jamie Gale. Today on Life with Strings Attached, I sit down with Richard Hoover, founder of Santa Cruz Guitar Company. From California's redwood forests and the threat of wildfires to the physics of string tension and modal analysis, Richard brings nearly 50 years of luthiery to this conversation. We explore how science, craftsmanship, and empathy shape the acoustic guitar, why collaboration and open knowledge are vital for innovation, and how tradition and community continue to guide the future of guitar making. I thoroughly enjoyed this conversation with Richard Hoover. I hope that you do as much as I do. Richard, great to see you.
Jamie,
thanks so much for being on the show.
By gosh, Gale, what a pleasure.
Thanks for being on Life with Strings Attached.
A pleasure indeed.
You're looking dapper as always.
Well, look, I'm trying to impress Jamie frickin' Gale here, so nothing's too good. Yeah, I dressed up for you.
You always look like a stately Southern gentleman, although I know you're not a Southern gentleman, but you always remind me of those fine linen suits from a bygone era. It looks great on you.
Well, thank you. This is most people here have never seen me that way in my office, so that's really fun. It's really fun. I'm Southern. I'm south of Fresno, north of Bakersfield.
Yes.
My heritage.
Southern, do we? Are you actually from California?
I am. I'm unusual, native Californian. I'm about 7 generations from Asheville, North Carolina.
Okay. Well, okay.
The generation before
is proper South. So
it wasn't woke then.
No, well, it probably wasn't.
They were still dozing.
Yeah. But Asheville's a wonderful city, and it's a great guitar culture there. Actually.
Yes.
Yeah. But 7 generations ago, I suspect you have no memory of such a thing.
Well, up until about 7 years ago, I'd get a postcard every year telling me to bring a hot casserole to the Methodist church for the reunion, right? And whoever that was aged out or couldn't get online.
Okay. Wow. 7 generations. I mean, California would have been the Wild West at that point in time.
Mm-hmm.
That's
when I was. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, tell me about that. Why did your family move west at a time where it was really, really a life-threatening challenge to move west?
Yeah, it was. Going away from home could kill you on a good day.
Yeah.
The lure of California is really, really strong, and it's not just a myth or mythology. It really is an astoundingly beautiful place. As people know, extremely tolerant. And here's what I'm not supposed to say. What I'm supposed to start with is except for the earthquakes every afternoon and the raging forest fires that come through that would keep you from moving here, I can go anywhere in the world and never be disappointed to come home. It's so beautiful. Yeah. It's really nourishing. But,
yes.
My father, most of my friends' parents were first generation Dust Bowl. And my father included. He rode a freight train out to go to art school in California instead of pick pieces with Merle.
Wonderful. You sort of say it half in jest about the earthquakes and the forest fires, but no, that it really is just kind of life there. I remember
it is.
I took a road trip, my first road trip, trying to sell guitars to retailers.
You're tough.
I'm not a guy to do things half-assed. So I got in the car and I drove literally across the entire United States, across the I-90 and down the coastal highway, all the way down to San Diego and back as my first road trip from Toronto. And there were substantial forest fires that year, and there was just smoke for hundreds and hundreds of miles. The fires were nowhere near LA, but the smoke was in LA. And by the time I got down there, I went into McCabe's in Santa Monica, and I was checking out the store.
Standing in the middle of the room for an hour and a half and nobody noticed you?
I won't say that, but I make myself noticed. But I saw the guitars swinging and the walls twisting.
Was this 89?
No, this would have been around 2009.
Oh, yeah.
It was a little while later.
Uh-huh.
And
yeah, big deal.
I thought there was a train track or something behind. I was like, does that happen all the time? They're like, that was an earthquake. I was like, that was an earthquake? Because I didn't feel threatened. Like nothing was falling on me, right?
Uh-huh.
I just...
You didn't know enough to be scared.
I didn't know enough to be scared.
Oh, it's amazing. Yeah, there is, we are, tuned in. We've been in this building for since the turn of the millennium. And in that time, we were evacuated once for forest fire, on standby several times. And actually even once for an earthquake where somehow they thought they'd cut it down to be able to predict it. Every couple of years there's a real disruption to business for something, flooding, whatever. But forest fires never used to encroach upon residential areas and business centers and things like that. That's a pretty new phenomenon.
Oh, so the forest fires are less genteel than they used to be.
They're much more voracious and fast-moving than they used to be. Dry weather, a lot of tinder. It's not that we don't rake our forests, but it's fact of life, and it's made us tough. We've been in business now for just about 11 months short of 50 years, and perspective, when we started in 76, there was half as many people in the world as there is today.
What month did you start in 76?
September. So our birthday's coming up September 22nd, yeah. That's our 49th, by the way. We're winding up for 50.
I'm aware. I was born in May of 76, so I was wondering, was I part of the half that existed or the half that was yet to come? And I just made it in under the half that existed when you started the company. We are them. There's more of us. It's been a neat evolution. Yeah. Remarkable journey, remarkable time. I want to touch a little bit on that forest fire for a second because. Sure. It's terrible, but it's interesting that it somewhat becomes a known factor. Forest fires are very natural, very normal. I have family in very northern British Columbia, and forest fires are just kind of part of summer. Like you're aware of them. You're on some level of alert, and if they get close enough, everyone has a packed bag.
Yeah,
but
prepare for
mostly exists without them. And the interesting thing for me is when I started coming to California, of course, in your part of the world, you have to try and get to a redwood forest and a sequoia forest to see these majestic giant trees.
My favorite animal.
But then you read about them and you learn from them that they only germinate under fire.
That's right. They need fire to propagate because it's always been part of the natural. It's not careless campers or boating yahoos. It's lightning to a large degree. And I was aware of that last night. We had dry lightning, and it's like there's took the beauty out of it in the night sky.
Wow.
It's always been part of the deal.
Yeah, the thing is, then you realize, well, if you live in a redwood forest, that the forest couldn't exist without some sort of regular fire cycle, which it sounds a little like, Jamie, you shouldn't be talking about this, but the reality
You're safe with me.
You just have to know that if there's redwoods, there is fire, and there's no other option. They can't live without it.
Well, I am an expert in redwoods and most things about them, but this, I'll give you an alert. This is speculation from what I've heard, that we kind of had a misguided approach to preventing forest fires. When I was a kid, the public service announcements were always, break your matches, crush your cigarette butts, pour water on your fire, because camping was a big deal. It was a big problem. Today, after generations of forest management where they did everything to prevent forest fires, the combustible stuff added up, right? It didn't go through a cleansing every few seasons or every decade or something like that. It goes 75 years without an event. That's a lot of burnable stuff. So that's changed a lot in forest management and controlled burns. And we see that. We see that constantly. It'll always be on the media. That smoke, it's intentional. Don't worry about it. And almost never, but sometimes that gets away from them. But we're getting smarter.
Yeah, that idea of controlling the inevitable is interesting and sometimes instigating it. I have been in the Rocky Mountains when a controlled avalanche went awry. And so they were trying to trigger the snow before it built up too much and came to the problem they didn't want it. But it came down with such force, it knocked the huge stone barriers into the highway when it came down. And as a classic entrepreneur, I took out the guitars and cymbals I was traveling with, and I put them in snow and made a photo shoot. I got time to kill. Let's get some beautiful pictures.
Way to go! I don't want to belabor this, but I find that the fire's terrifying. We live rural, and we're really aware of that, and like what kind of vegetation and plants and piles that we have. But when the fires are close enough that there's like ash falling, any one of those could be live enough to start again, and it's just nerve-wracking. Where an earthquake, you don't wring your hands over it because you don't know it's coming.
Right.
It just happens, right?
Yeah, it just happens. It just happens. Yeah. Yeah, one of my podcast guests earlier this year is down in the LA area, and Dr. Gale Buckwalter, he's the first person that the FDA has ever approved for a brain-computer interface in the prefrontal cortex.
Yikes.
So he's got direct connections, but he's been a paraplegic for 50 years. And the day of the evacuation, his wheelchair van was in for service. And so he fled from the fires in a powered wheelchair, just like down the road as fast as that thing goes, which is not that fast.
Keep that battery holding out.
Yeah, wow, he's around to tell the story. So
that's amazing.
Yeah. So it's certainly nothing to be belittled. It is something that you should be afraid of because it does pose a mortal danger. But it's interesting to understand it anyways. And I think that it connects, the Redwood story connects to you, because I think that my first awareness of Redwood is not from your guitars, but from someone that we both know who built a Redwood guitar. And I believe you have helped him even get Redwood. And that's our friend with the common last name, your German descendants anyways, of Nick Hoover.
Oh, that's great.
And so
I spell it wrong, not him.
Top guitar. That's right.
Yeah. Yeah, he's a wonderful guy to have as a cousin. He got this beautiful, beautiful flame stuff that's really hard to get, Yeah. Really hard to get. Redwood's my favorite animal.
Yes.
Next to the pelican.
But when Nick started trying to source Redwood, you came up very quickly in the conversation. And so, I think my first real consciousness besides your brand of guitars was about conversations around Redwood and the efforts you were going for reclaimed Redwood and such also, because you're not just sourcing it from fallen trees, but from many other areas, correct?
It can come from old structures, come from windfall, lightning strike, dead standing trees is a big thing, but always reclamation and never cut from a living tree. There are responsible forestry projects where people do sustainable yield, but Redwood's not one that is really amenable to that. We need stuff that really grew in a, let's call it a virgin environment, where the ecosystem hadn't been disrupted by logging or daylighting, where the plants grew in a really steady, continual manner. So the density of the wood is more desirable for resonance, is more rich and colorful, and the stories that go along with it really connect you to the resource. So that's how it has to be for us. I'm really not interested in anything else. So to maybe answer a question you didn't ask there, for us, we will make, we're almost exclusively custom at this point. We'll make way less than 500 guitars in a year, more like less than 400. So how many redwood tops do we need in a year? Oh, maybe 100. So to get the best of the best, I don't want to be at the bottom of the food chain where it's been picked through, and somebody's selling an exquisite example for a really high price. I want to be at the top end where we buy as directly from the source as we can. We can verify the responsible harvest. We can also know the story behind it, and we can buy a whole lot of wood, take what we need, and then share the wealth with that. So we're not well known as wood dealers. We don't advertise ourselves as that, but I'm so widely connected in the business, I don't have to. Not that we wouldn't like other customers, but it's part and parcel of a real purpose, our real cause. To explain that you don't have to wreck a tree or compromise an environment or put a culture at peril to make the best stuff in the world. Quite the contrary.
I agree. I'm a big proponent of the master being more important, frankly, than the material. And it's not that the material is not important, but the way we shape the material takes precedence over the material itself. And there's a very simple way of looking at materials that says that this material equals this sound or this response. But true mastery means you know how to approach that particular material and how to get from it what you want within reason. And I think that the simplification of things like rosewood equals bassy response, mahogany equals mid-range is just a little too simplified.
Wrong too.
Yeah.
Well, actually, I'm not one to make those kind of absolute statements. Forgive me. So I agree about 3/4 of the way of the woods available in a particular family of woods. There's a percentage that's better for tonality or potential tonality than others. So there are woods that are more appropriate for guitars than not of the same name. And in evaluating those, as you talked about, is the skill necessary to be able to guarantee your customer what they want? And they might not know what to ask for. You might have to determine that for listening to their playing and their influences. But you may know my story. When I started, there were no books on guitar making. There were no videos yet. I turned to violin. And in that body of knowledge, I was convinced guitars were made the same way. And you wanted to not only evaluate the wood, do your own empirical body of knowledge for modal analysis and manipulate that wood for one customer at a time. Boy, was I surprised when I found out guitars aren't like that, but we still do that. And so that modal analysis, one of my career goals was to put that in a scientific vocabulary so you could talk about it universally. It's not luthiery talk, which is loaded with opinion or judgment, I should say. And to put that in a scientific vocabulary and develop the mechanisms to measure that so it wasn't just my empirical body of knowledge for doing this for 55 years. We could have other people do it with the same accuracy and get that right piece of wood, not for guitars, but for that person's guitar. I should qualify. Great. We're not classical builders. We're not bluegrass builders. We're builders of custom guitars that could include jazz, fingerstyle, classical, bluegrass, on, and different properties, not qualities, but properties, would be desirable for each of those different genres.
Do you want to expound upon that?
What did he say? Yes, I would. Here's a great one. Now, I found out, by the way, this is not lutherie stuff. You could spend... you have to spend a lifetime trying to get a living at lutherie. How in the world do you develop the knowledge to come up with a sophisticated, incredible modal analysis system that's repeatable. I can't. We work with Stanford University's acoustic physics program, and a lot of that is experimental. And the Naval Postgraduate School of Acoustic Physics, that's do what we do. They study resonance in a chamber. Unfortunately, theirs are like Scud missiles and rockets to the moon. But and what we do, we have to take a certain number of properties we want to measure and put them on a value scale, 1 to 100. So if you wanted to know I'm going to call it the scale of clarity. It's a weird one. I call it tone. Other luthiers call it everything, but it's if you were playing like a rhythm, a lot of singer-songwriter, maybe blues, things like that. A warmer, darker, more blended tone is really desirable for most people. If you were a jazz or a fingerstyle player where you want the audience to hear each note clearly and articulately, that would be really limiting. You want something bright, clear, and articulate. So that scale is 10 little bells or 100 little bells, starting at one end with silver, really bright, clear, articulate, and the other end is bronze, which is dark, warm. They're all the same frequency, the same volume, but you get the scale of tone. An easier one is when you play your string over your sound hole and you move towards the bridge, the tone gets more clear, gets brighter. So that's the property that woods, that's the biggest thing woods do, is contribute to that scale of clarity, and you want to be able to get the right piece of wood for that particular player's genre, style, and preferences. It really gets confused with another thing we'd measure, which is EQ. And I know you just said this kind of jokingly, because I've heard it many times. Oh man, you want a big bassy bluegrass dreadnought, you got to have Brazilian rosewood. Well, you could, in measuring wood, you could find that a piece of wood had potential for that bass treble to mid-range thing, but that's not how you get it in a guitar. You would get it by manipulating that wood, how you brace it, how big the sound hole is, etc., how much airspace, and you manipulate the EQ. It is not given to you by the wood itself. So people mix up tone and EQ a lot. A guitar that's bright, somebody may say, man, that's too high end. Or a guitar that's really warm, they may call it bassy. So it's really good to differentiate between those two, for one.
I agree, and I don't know that we've talked about this. I think I probably mentioned it at some point in our conversations, Richard, but I agree very much with you. And in 2023, myself and Ed Keller, an architect from New York, put together a symposium at the Venice Biennale of Architecture to discuss the materiality of sound. For this reason, that we don't have a common lexicon. We don't have a common language set in terms. And I'm not just talking about within guitar makers. I'm talking about all people who are working with materials and acoustics. So we involved some guitar makers, but we also involved physicists, neuroscientists from the point of perception.
Oh, you get around. I love that.
There is no sound. We involved mechanical engineers, acousticians, architects, a couple of musicians to discuss, because I've been reaching out into different creative disciplines for a number of years now to try and learn, how do you approach this particular question? What language do you use? Why did you use that word to describe that? Because we might have used a different word, but that brings out a subtle nuance which can be very important and helps clarify an unresolved question by doing so. And so we had a wonderful panel discussion on this a couple of years ago. And did we finalize a lexicon? Of course not. That's probably decades or centuries of work yet to go.
I commend you. That's thrilling. That's thrilling. And that kind of inquiry, critical thinking, is oftentimes missing, not because we're dumb as a group of tradesmen. It's just that we're too passionate about what we do. And the nemesis of repeatable science is opinion and emotion, right? So if I'm not mistaken, we also published a paper in that same context. I remember the name of the city, and maybe it's a larger symposium or whatever. But that, again, my career goal was to put this stuff in a scientific vocabulary. So, I mean, it's not sexy or poetic, but another scientist across the world could understand what you're saying. Unfortunately, there's a lot of holes in. I shouldn't say it that way. There's a lot of stuff in our scientific inquiry that we go after dispassionately. That's what makes a good scientist. They're ready to accept whatever results. Truth is important, not the quality of results. And as you know, there's many people who develop modal analysis systems to prove that their guitars are better for whatever reason. That's a bad premise. So we have to be we have to marry those two: the pure, unadulterated science and its quest for repeatability, and somebody with decades of experience that intuitively knows what questions to ask and what to look for. You know, have you thought about that? And that's where I can see you're coming from with the vocabulary that's more user friendly.
Well,
rather than just acoustic science definition.
I'm looking for something that is both precise and shows that we properly understand it. So a lot of people that I speak to about acoustics and modal analysis within the guitar community have acquired a certain set of knowledge, but here's where I get in shit.
Well, don't try to do this alone.
Well, no, I'm not trying to do it alone. I get into trouble to sort of say that
it's going to expose.
If you can't explain it to me in a simple term in an elevator pitch, you don't understand it. It's that simple. Right. And so I haven't come across many people who can simplify the understanding that then you can explain it to somebody who is not a guitar person, that is not really into acoustics. And being that's a good litmus of Konstantin Brancusi, I really believe in the concept that simplicity is complexity resolved. And I always strive for the simplest understanding possible because I have to resolve the complexity to get there.
The truth is simple.
The truth should be relatively simple. And so the same physics that govern that guitar are the same physics that govern the swirling of the tea in my teacup, and the same thing that keeps a bird in flight. Or you mentioned the earthquake warnings. Do you know how earthquake warnings happen?
I don't know what is the popular methodology. What are the indicators? But animal behavior and bird behavior that you mentioned is a huge one. People in retrospect talking about realizing all the birds went quiet before our major earthquake, and what do dogs act, cats act strange? There's something there that they can sense that we can't. Either our heads are too busy or we're not tuned in enough. That certainly would be able to be measured at some point, but I don't know what that is.
So there is an early warning tsunami system that exists. And the tsunami, of course, is happening because of seismic activity at the bottom of the ocean. It's an earthquake there that sets the ground in motion, which sets the water in motion, which eventually builds up to a tremendous, what we used to call tidal wave.
And there's a time lapse between those,
And there's a lapse there. And a scientist came up with an early warning system on this, and it has nothing to do with the water or the ground. They are tracking not the ozone layer, but the layer one or two layers above it. And when it will move, and when it is triggered, and we're watching it, we say there has been a seismic activity large enough to send a tsunami. And so we're tracking the sky, the membrane. The membrane that the Earth is contained within. There's multiple layers. There's not just the ozone. There's other sort of spheres that exist between us and the greater universe. And one of those, they're tracking it. And when it has enough movement, we say the epicenter of the movement of this membrane is here. There has been a seismic event of great enough concern that started here within the ocean, and now we have about 30 minutes warning that it's going to hit the shore.
You just answered, sorry to interrupt, but you just answered my question, because what's the cause and effect? Was there the disturbance in the atmosphere was a precursor to the tsunami, or vice versa, or is there another factor that put them both into motion, but the atmospheric disturbance showed up earlier than the movement of the water? That's delicious.
So one of the things that I think was really important for me to get a greater understanding of physics was to stop thinking about the world as solid matter, liquid matter, and gaseous matter. And really what I now think of those things is all molecules with greater distance between them. And so it is all should be considered to be touching. Some of them are a little further apart,
somehow interconnected. Yeah.
So in the solid mass of the land, the molecules are closer together there than they are in the liquefied version, and the gaseous version, they're a little further apart yet. But the fact is, it is not nothingness. So we kind of think of it as mass, liquid, and nothingness. But the gases are as relevant as the liquid and the matter are, and the solid matter are. And so what's happening is there's just a chain reaction from the epicenter that's moving from one molecular mass to the next until it eventually triggers the diaphragm that is containing us.
That certainly merits some more inquiry. That's fascinating. I'll look into that. Maybe I can buy you a pop sometime and we can talk about it.
Well, it's important because when we're thinking about the physics of an acoustic guitar, we still the acoustic guitar in physics sense is an object that is potential energy, because it's a tensioned object that if we move it with our own kinetic movement, we set it in motion. And really what you're doing when you're shaping the sound of an acoustic, to what we call the sound of an acoustic guitar, is you are directing the energy to parts of the system where we want it and keeping it from parts of the system where we do not want it. We are filtering how fast we want it released from one area versus the other. And that's what you're talking about when you're opening and closing your sound hole, changing the aperture. You're creating either an obstacle or you're making an affordance for the inevitable movement of energy.
That too.
And so when people think about something as simple of, let's use this established cut pattern and we're going to shape our tone or EQ, whatever term you want to be using and how you want to differentiate, but we just use the same pattern and we change the back and side material or we change the top material, and that's what makes our shaping of sound. That is it, but it's a very simplified way of doing it.
Well, yeah, it is. I don't want to interrupt again. If you're done, I'd like to add to that.
No, it's great. Please.
Thinking kind of simply here, I don't want to go too out there. There's too many trajectories in this, but one of them is if you're trying to control EQ in the guitar, you can do a lot of that mechanically. In other words, repeatable by dimensions. You can affect it by dimensions. You can really refine it by more than that, by applying your knowledge to that. But the presence of the guitar, like I said, it sounds away. You can also mechanically direct where that volume goes. Let's imagine that you strum a guitar, and the energy goes in every direction. with a little more preference to where the sound hole is because it has easier affordance, the term that you used for it. But mechanically, you can do things to change that projection where you can make the guitar bigger to the player or have it project out. And I could show how people to do, like a factory, how to do that mechanically with some pretty good success. What we're talking here is we're talking about the subjective parts of sound, what you can do on your stereo or your sound system. The reason we have knobs and sliders on our sound system is our personal choice. There is no right or wrong. If there was an established right or wrong, we'd get a black box with no knobs and sliders. But that the thing we perceive as quality of sound, and let's say, really what it is trying to remove as many inharmonicities as you can, but it's easier to kind of fudge and say to bring the thing into harmony with itself so it works as a unit and it works the most efficiently to sustain and develop rich, colorful overtones that everybody goes, ooh, that's a good one. So two things, your choice and the things everybody wants. Some you can do mechanically and some you have to manipulate that, and you can't do it by a measurement. And that's really the secret of Stradivarius. They weren't built dimensionally accurately, but they were built frequency accurate, if I may. Boy, that's an unscientific term, but I think it makes it understandable. Okay, I'll calm down now.
No, it's okay. So tell me more about that. So how were they building it as opposed to dimensionally, but frequency accurate?
Let's just take this analogy of, you have a grand piano in an acoustically perfect concert hall. And we all experienced this. It doesn't need much description. That somebody plays a multi-note chord, and it sustains and it swells and it fills the room, and people get moved with emotion. You hear a beautiful piece, and it may inspire you to go on the street and march for a cause. It may make you fall in love with the person next to you. It really has something going on. And then there's random notes on the piano that will make equal volume, noise, etc. But you got to wait for it to get over with. It doesn't have what moves us as human beings. And the putting together more than one note in harmony is what develops that. I'm just going to call it sustain, and the development of overtones that move us. It's qualitative. So. If you throw enough rocks at a piano, one of my favorite analogies, you'll get a chord every once in a while. But you also get all these partial harmonies too. So, you have 100 people line up, throw rocks at the piano, monkeys on a typewriter, if you will, and you're going to get varying degrees of quality of sound. That describes exactly what a factory does when they assemble instruments based on dimensions. Because wood isn't a consistent, homogeneous density like metal. 10 pieces of wood the same size out of the same board will ring at random frequencies. It's your job as a luthier to put those into harmony with each other and attain an instrument that works with itself to produce harmony, sustain, and overtones. If you don't do that, it'll still happen every once in a while. But what makes you different than the factory, other than beautiful workmanship, dedication, making no money, whatever it is that you're adding some quality of sound that a factory can't repeat by having a formula of dimensions, dimensional accuracy. That's what makes manufacturing of anything efficient. Make pieces all the same size, have assembly systems where things only fit one way. That's how you make money in lutherie, but that's not how you make an instrument that's going to move people to propose marriage or change an international border.
As a guitar builder and a player, you have a sense for when something's working right. That's why so many of the world's best trust D'Addario. Unmatched tone, perfect intonation, and strings made to the tightest tolerances in the industry. That reputation is no accident. It's the result of 400 years of being obsessed with quality and innovation. D'Addario. When you know, you know. This space is normally reserved for brands who make stories like this possible, like the Dario and the Cedar Creek Custom Case Shop. If your company belongs in this conversation, let's talk. We partner with brands who value craft, culture, and the quiet power of a well-placed idea.
Mm-hmm. See, this is why it was my life's goal to put this into a scientific vocabulary. So it's not, because I'm talking emotionally here. I'm not being a scientist right now. I'm talking in terms we should all understand. You play 10 of factory brand X, and you want to get the good one. We hear this all the time. They're not all good. They're not all the best. They're pretty one. And most companies most factories have fit a formula where they can get repeatable sex. Dr. Freud, we have an emergency here. Repeatable success by coming up with a sound that's not complex, but it's loud, and it's kind of monodimensional, but it's impressive. It's wow, that's big, but it's not the stuff that moves you to write a song and change the world. So that woo-woo, if you will, is the thing that we're struggling in science for to quantify. And as deep and speculative we've gone into scientific inquiry, including quantum physics, there's still something missing that is annoying the heck out of us, right? And somewhere there within what I'm describing, that interaction you talked about on a molecular scale, some things are more denser, some things are more are closer, some things are farther apart. But if you could take the helicopter view and you could see galaxies forming and fading and dying, you'd also see this movement. You also see this pulse that goes on. And I think the closest we come to create that harmony of the spheres, universal order, is in music. It transcends words. It's a universal language. It brings everybody together. It's a common denominator. So, did I fit it all in yet? Look, this is fun because I know you can come back to me with equally stimulating ideas and lines of inquiry. I can't learn fast enough. And somewhere around 33, I realized I'm not going to do the Tour de France. I'm not going to play professional violin, and I'll never be in the big leagues. I think I'll concentrate on guitars. And I'm not going to be the next Bob Dylan. Yeah. So let's do it in lutherie. But man, you sparked me. Thank you.
Well, thank you. I enjoy speaking with you also for the same reasons. And so, wait a sec. So this is a published scientific paper?
Yeah. I'll send it to you, and you can
we access it?
Yeah, I'll send it to you. You're welcome to share it. I don't want to try to search right now. It'll distract me too much.
No, that's fine. Please send it to me.
And credit where credit's due. The scientists. We've been at this for years, 20 years, but the guy that's given us the biggest advances, Mark Rau, R-A-U, and Mark will pop up in any scientific inquiries in acoustic physics. We started with him as a student at Stanford, later on as a graduate student, advanced degree, and now he's a professor at MIT, and which each leap in his career, we get less and less and less access to him, and we made all the guitars he could possibly need for a lifetime, right? So we published the paper. I got invited by Alessia Ambrosi to do a talk in Cremona on this modal analysis and give demonstrations, which talk about imposter complex. Guitar maker from California invited to the birthplace of the violin to tell them something they don't know. But because it's fun and to give credibility to what we're doing here, draw attention to it so we can collect some funds. This is not a Santa Cruz Guitar Company profit center, quite the opposite. It'll be open source. And it'll be available to everybody else. And the more people contribute to it, the more of a body of data we can get to code. Now, I got to speak correctly here. I turned that down. I've got some personal obligations that break my heart. I can't go do that. I've done that masterclass twice before. So I turned it over to Rick Bartow, B-A-R-T-O. Did you meet Rick at the summit?
I believe so.
Okay.
Yes.
Rick is my...
I'm bad with names, but you introduced me to someone at the summit.
I got called home a day early. I didn't get to make the rounds that I normally do. Good to see you in the hall, though.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway,
Mm-hmm.
that kind of stuff will take us from the trading somebody a guitar, whatever, to maybe get some more interest that can advance our cause and get us to where we have an affordable device, which is one part of it. Nobody is going to get a $20,000 laser vibrometer to improve their guitars in their workshop. But for what we used to call Radio Shack parts, for $300, you can do a real credible job of it. So anyway, that's the idea. Open source, successful mechanisms, and a really professional body of knowledge behind it, and the code to be able to operate it. So you're welcome to ask anything you want, and Rick's talk will be captured somehow from, I can't remember what they call that, Mondo Musica. You know what I'm talking about in Cremona? Annually?
In Cremona, yeah. Yeah, I'm familiar with it. Leslie invites me every year, and unfortunately it lines up with our tour season. And so I'm always on tour during that time, and I've never made it. And
it lines up with the Mannheim Summit in Germany too. Man, exactly. Too much fun. So
yes,
thanks. I wanted to bring up this open source issue. That's the key to our success from the very beginning. That's why we're still in business 50 years later. Otherwise, we've been squashed by a bug, by big companies, other competition, earthquakes, fires, flood. People protect us as a resource. They share with us, and that makes life good. You know, that's the reward for it. So this I'm talking about is not as self-promotion or Santa Cruz promotion, more an exciting new thing for our trade, how we can do the opposite of taking the magic out of it, understand how to have it within our control.
Wonderful. You know,
now I'll talk about my line of vitamins and supplements you can subscribe to.
Perfect. We'll cut the commercial for you.
Yeah.
You know, recently we published an article on our website that was written by Uli Teufel. I don't know if you know Teufel Guitars in Germany.
Yeah.
So Uli's a brilliant person, wonderful guitar maker.
Beautiful designs too.
Yeah. And Uli wrote an article about the intentional guitar, and one of the things that he put in this thesis that I thought was really interesting was the effects of copyright on the evolution of the guitar that the Cremonese and the violin makers never had to deal with. And so the violin makers were all working on the same instrument, more or less, and evolving it. But because of copyright law, we have to distinguish ourselves from our competition or from our fellow peers, even if you're friendly. We have this thing about unique selling propositions and differentiation in the marketplace and copyrights that didn't exist for the Viol family. And as a result, they were able to dial in on one particular model and perhaps perfect it, if there is such a thing. But because of copyright law and how it evolved in our culture, it actually prevents multiple people from stacking concepts and evolving one particular model. What do you think about that?
I feel really strongly about it. It's probably evoked some mind-clouding emotion there. I don't want to speak publicly from that position, so I'll take a breath here. I just got done talking about the value of open source. And when I was 22 and I talked like that, people are like, yeah, you know, you kids, you think life is ideal and you have this rosy view of the future. You just need to get your ass kicked and your skull cracked a few times and you'll come around. You'll protect your profit. I've been at this for 50 years. Not only did it work, but it's a model that I love sharing with other people. giving witness to the power of being unself-serving. So when you talk about the violin thing, now I'm not an expert. I read the popular stuff that everybody's read. I've read obscure diaries and reviews and speculations and all that. And unless I'm wrong, those guys were creepy secretive, you know. And I know this today with like the Spanish and Italian builders. When I first started out, those guys were not going to talk to you. You know, it was a really strict code. You didn't share stuff. It went from master to apprentice in a linear progression. And my career goal was to bust that open as much, you know, with I have a tiny little bullhorn here, and show that it worked and it was worthwhile. So when we talk about they didn't have copyrights, yeah, they didn't, but they sure had peer pressure.
They trade secrets.
Guilds. Yeah, they had guilds. They had secrets. Yeah. And they had peer pressure. I said it 2 times. So, it's evocative. I'm going to think out loud with him. I'm going to practice think on this rather than give you an opinion. You said, "What do you think?" Welcome to my brain. So
train a consciousness with a healthy dose of forgiveness and grace.
Oh, thank you. So now we have copyrights. Now here's the thing: I don't begrudge anybody that's put $1 million into software that wants to protect their acoustic pickup system. You know, right on. You know, that's your stuff. You paid for it, and you know, if you want to share it, that's perfect up to you. But I don't think it's a issue of ethics. In acoustic guitars, I'm just going to ask out loud, as if I was dealing with an audience. Can anybody think of anything that was patented that was worthwhile that stuck around an acoustic guitar that wasn't an electronic amplification or things like that? Now this sounds like a hubris, but I stand a pretty good chance of figuring out what somebody's done by looking at a guitar. I could probably imagine what it's going to sound like, and if somebody's done an improvement, I've got opinions based on a lot of experience that I'm going to be able to guess probably what it does. So what can you copyright that truly would give you a marketable advantage? I shouldn't have said that. That would give you a sonic advantage. Marketable advantage is why I see somebody copyright, so nobody else could brag about having that. But I don't know what that is. Acoustic guitars are simple. It's what you do with it.
Well, I think when it comes to shapes, so if you look at the vials, they've designed one particular shape and volume size primarily that people have worked and dialed in over a period of centuries.
They're stuck.
And if we look at the Spanish guitar, the Torres sort of model, it's really hard to distinguish by looking at one Spanish guitar to the other, the classical guitar, right? And as a matter of fact, it's really hard to value pricing on them. You know, with steel string guitars, you know, they look fancier, they look more expensive versus the cheaper version. That's not the same so much with the classical guitar. To the untrained eye, they look much the same from 500 to 50,000.
I hear you. Luckily, that's changed somewhat in the last 20 years, but I hear exactly what you're talking about.
Well, but the point is, listen, according to like basic Pythagorean theorem, the observation that a given chord at a specific length with a specific diameter at a specific tension will always ring through at the same frequency. You know, the violin string, 440 hertz, 440 movements within 1 second, right? And that's, so if you take that sort of physics approach, you would think for a particular tonal range, there should be an optimal size for the efficiencies of that system, right? There's a reason that a violin is a different size than than the viola, than the cello, than the upright bass, and that has to do with what range of frequencies it is intended to project.
Survival of the fittest.
Well,
the one that worked the best is repeated.
The fiddlist. Yeah. And so
I missed that.
Sorry, Richard. So you would theoretically, there is one shape of guitar which would be the ideal shape to project most efficiently this particular range. And because of two-dimensional copyright of shapes, we are not allowed to pursue the dialing in of one particular shape because we're incentivized not to.
A Les Paul, a Strat, a Tele, even those copies are ubiquitous. Technically, that's what you're talking about.
But a J200 is the same thing.
She's
right, and so they if you try and produce a guitar with that same sort of outline, the Gibson company will very likely say that's
send you a letter.
Our outline, right? And
that's a rite of passage for luthiers.
Yeah, that's right. I can't tell you how many times a year I get a panicky something. I got this letter from Gibson, and I'm not blaming Gibson for it. I just mean that the system of copywriting and trademarking in this way, of copywriting particularly, prevents the evolution of design.
I agree. Something I want to park for later. I use this kinetic memory. If I say something, it'll stick in my head. You were talking about an optimal size for the guitar. And I'm going to ask, at a given scale, if you change that scale, would you, out of necessity, change the shape of the guitar? I don't know. Asking myself that. So you could have a variety of body shapes operating optimally because where their bridge is or the scale length has been adapted for that, or vice versa. I don't know.
Yeah, but we scatter out our evolution because we can't have the same two-dimensional outlines. And so now somebody is improving this part of the system over here while someone else is improving the part of the system over here, but they're working with a different shape. And because they're working with a different shape, the primary membrane, the top, and its movement and its air volume and how this is working is enough of a dynamic difference that the evolution that someone else made over here would have to be done differently to have the same effect on guitar B.
Maybe
follow. So whereas the violins have all dialed into, there is the violin archetype. It is this shape at this volume. And, now we work with the plates and such, but there's an established scale length. There's an established volume of air mass. There's an established Helmholtz frequency with the F holes. All of these things are known and dialed in and could not be produced by multiple companies if we had modern copyright laws applied to them. If one person, if Stradivari owned that shape, all the other violin makers would have to fuck off.
Yeah, and the irony is people were judged on any variation from exactly copying that size F hole or that shape or the V string or the purfles or whatever.
But we have the opposite situation in the guitar.
Yeah.
So we cannot dial in the perfect guitar iteration of the violin.
I want to make sure I didn't derail you from your point, because we started talking about how guitar making has changed with the advent of copyrights and protected intellectual property. And then we went off and had our fun. Was there something you wanted to follow through on that, or was there a conclusion that you guys came up in your discussion?
No, I mean, it's an article written by Uli Teufel. It's published on
secretitletrace.com.
It's called Intentional Guitar. And I just, it's the first time that someone has suggested that premise to me. And so as someone else who has thought a lot about guitars, I thought, well, what does Richard have to say about this idea of us not being able to evolve off the same shape? And is that a serious disadvantage or not? Or do you have some other observation that I hadn't thought of?
Thank you. And I gave you plenty. I'm just going to close with this, is that the premise, or I'm going to say what the premise should be is, I did say this, are those patents to protect a marketing opportunity, let's say in exclusive use of this design or this endorser or whatever. We're talking about the mechanical shape of the guitar. Exclusive on that, or is an improvement of sound that gives you the advantage in the marketplace. And I'm saying that I wonder what you can do to an acoustic guitar to really make it sound better rather than just louder acoustically. Like, one could argue, well, the dobro is a better instrument because it's louder, or the gypsy jazz guitar, that's better because, and both those have a sound that can drive some people screaming out of the room, So.
Well, what is better?
I don't want to lose you there. It's a funny thing, but it did bring out that emotional response in me. Is like, I'm just not a fan of keeping secrets to protect something you truly didn't. Well, no, that sounds too judgmental. Sometimes I don't know what I'm talking about, but that doesn't keep me from opening my mouth.
You can make judgment calls. I mean, you can't exist without making judgment calls. I mean, you have a very specific, discriminating way of making guitars. You are very discerning and very discriminating in your choices as to what materials you're going to use and how you're going to approach the making and joining of those materials. Discrimination in itself is not a bad concept. Prejudicism, undue prejudicism, is a bad concept.
It annoys your neighbors.
If you can't figure out, whether you should or shouldn't do something, then you're screwed.
I probably should I should bring this down to the personal level. I've never found anything that I felt strongly I wanted to protect because I earned it, it belonged to me, whatever. It's never come around. A neck joint system, a truss rod system. Now we will, if I live long enough, you'll see what I consider to be the definitive acoustic pickup system for your guitar. Notice I didn't say a guitar, I said your guitar. And it's going to take a lot of time, a lot of expense, a lot of stuff, and that's going to take $1 million in software development. Probably instead of spending that to start from the ground, we'll partner with somebody that's already done that part of it, and our processing will be what the magic part is. And I'll probably have to face that. What part of this should be patented so somebody doesn't knock it off in the next few years and everybody loses their investment? So it's an evocative question. Ask me in 10 years.
The most provocative answer I've ever heard from that was when Jay Leno interviewed Elon Musk. And he was going through his rocket factory and said, we make our rockets from stainless steel. No one else does that. And Leno says, "Oh, did you patent that?" And without any delay, Musk responds, "No, patents are for the weak." And Leno's taken aback. He's like, "What? Wait a second. What do you mean patents are for the weak?"
You should have better ways to protect your stuff.
Well, and Musk simply responded, says, "Well, when you think about it, patents don't move anyone forward. They're like landmines in war. They're meant to stop the enemy from moving forward, but they don't help you move forward." And so his approach is not to patent this and limit everyone else from being able to do it. He does many things open source.
Really helpful.
The idea is to continue to innovate and not worry about whether they're catching up.
That's great. It helps me understand my initial reaction. I was like, I'm reacting emotionally to this. What is this about? I don't like the idea of people having patents in acoustic guitars, but it's evocative. I'd have to think about that as a judgment. So that's a neat discussion.
The interesting thing for me is patents in acoustics themselves is someone would actually have to be able to convincingly communicate what the acoustics are in court in order to be able to patent it or defend it. And I haven't met many people who can actually describe them yet. So,
oh man, that's great. Oh, and there's nothing to put your knowledge to the test than opening your mouth and trying to describe it to a grown-up, and you really find out how well you understand.
Well, that's exactly
what you're doing,
isn't it? And I don't mean to disrespect anybody who I've had these conversations with, because I think that we are progressing and we're moving in the right direction. From my experience so far, the people who are talking about modal analysis and talking about the effects of the acoustic guitar are focused a little too narrowly to me. Almost the entire conversation is on tops. There's very little talk about the back and sides, about the effects of the neck, tuner mass, the effects of your bridge mass on the amplitude of the top, and there's this idea that bridges should be lighter, should be super light, and that is a way to approach it, but actually a little more mass in the bridge will gain inertia and amplitude, and maybe you want more amplitude in the top.
It's a great trick for controlling projection, like I said earlier. If you want to spend your $100 in volume on the audience primarily, heavier pig in, heavy bridge, heavier neck, we'll do that. And the bridge is important.
Yeah. And so, although I think that progress is being made, I haven't had many conversations that I think are broad enough to be able to truly master exactly what's happening with the guitar, its aspects, and that's okay. We have to build those one step onto the other. And so I'm very keen to know how far your research has gone with Professor Rao as well, and be able to read that particular document and see where it goes.
Be great if you give me an email or send me a text and prompt me, and I'll get that for you. I don't want this as self-promotion, but I thought of that Musk-Leno discussion really triggered something in me. We make a guitar string, which we sell under our name.
Parabolic tension.
It's not a cobbled together package of existing strings. It's not rebranded anything. There are design, our method of manufacture, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So, did we patent that? No, it's real expensive and it's hard to defend, right? It's more like a puffing out your chest bravado, right? So I think of what Musk said. Patent our strings would be for the weak. What we do really to assure the superiority of these costs a lot of money, and it puts us in a safe place. Our strings are like 20-something bucks. Don't quote me. I don't know exactly because I don't sell them. And I think if anybody did that seriously, they probably should charge $35. And if anybody thinks for a second, $35 for guitar strings, that's absurd, is it? Violin players pay well over $100 for 4 strings. What's happening here, right? Manufacturers don't think the guitar market has come along enough yet to be able to appreciate that. Enough people that would do it. So anyway, we don't need to patent what we're doing because it would cost somebody a lot to duplicate it. Now, they can copy the words and brag about it, and that might have been a good idea to copyright something like parabolic tension, which is, I think I might be the only one in the world that could really explain how it applies to guitar strings, yet there's other companies that have put it on their package just because it sounds so goddamn cool.
Are you willing to explain it?
I will. Let's try to do an elevator thing. If we can drop all our biases here and our conditioning, until around 85, guitars, you didn't know what gauge guitar strings were. You bought them, and I think you could buy light, medium, and black diamonds, but they weren't comparable on gauge. And Siminoff did a great presentation along with some people from Gibson at the time to try to get industry-wide agreement on gauges and to publish those in the packaging and educate the public on what gauge meant. What gauge means is if you took calipers and you measured your string, that number's the gauge. Right? But it just tells you nothing about what tension that string would produce. And the biggest part of that is the quarter-width ratio. You can change the string's tension by about 10 pounds. The tension will change how it drives the guitar. It affects the EQ. And overall, if you put them in a a thoughtful array, you get a guitar that's easier to play, less tension overall, produces more volume, and has more accurate intonation, and they last a lot longer. And that part of that is going into the selection of materials, precision of manufacturing, the expensive stuff that keep us safe. But the we don't publish this. I don't want somebody to go out and do the same thing, but I'm not going to patent it. What do I want to call this? Formula, if you will, and it's kind of formalized in how you would marry those tensions to get the optimal response. Now, elevator pitch, I'd say this. Most strings are sold without consideration of tension, but gauge, because people the popularized combination of gauges. And it's like assigning a Chihuahua, a Great Dane, a Lamborghini, and a turtle to pull a cart. It's not going to pull that cart efficiently. In fact, it's going to wobble all over the place and not get very far very fast. But like in old teams of horses that pulled stagecoaches and wagons, where they put the strongest horses strategically and then taper off from that, and they got a lot more efficient locomotion out of it. In our case, if you move the bridge more efficiently, you get more volume with less energy. And that's the basis of it, and then the quality of manufacture. Is that understandable? Okay. I mean, you're smart. I just wondered if that explanation was helpful.
I understood what you said. I'd have to test it to know that it was really true, but I presume you've done some testing.
A lot.
Yeah.
And we continue to do so. Right? We continue to do so. Now, there's a lot of subjective stuff in strings for people. Tone, what alloys you make them out of, where it's bright, clear, articulate, warm, dark, rounded, and the color of it, the way it looks, things like that. But we're mostly added values and things that you don't see. And if it didn't make a difference, we wouldn't have gone to market with it. Why? We're not about selling strings. We're about supporting our habit. We make the best possible guitar we can, and then we ask people to pay for it. But our supporting things like cases, strings, tuners, it's not practical to manufacture, so we have to design ourselves and have made what we think is superior quality. So that's true about our gears, our cases, and finally our strings. And we sell them to get a scale where they're more affordable. We don't want to pay $125 for a set of strings for 500 guitars a year. So that's why they're on the market.
Okay.
That was
so
two
let me ask you this. Once you improve the efficiencies of your string, what cascading effects did it have for how you then make your guitar?
Well, it didn't change. Well, like on the pause here, it's not so much evident that we need to make a change in our guitars, is we weren't getting the full potential out of the guitar that we built into it with commercial strings, especially with the advent of non-corrosive protective coatings, which were really controversial when they first came out, but they were a godsend for a maker. You send a guitar to a store, and that might be the end of it, and that might not even be tuned again, let alone have the strings changed. And as you know, it only takes one person with that magic skin chemistry to have them go dead, poor intonation, and turn green. So you can't police that, and coated strings really, really helped immensely on that. And so we have to have some provision like that. Now that's something I don't talk about because it's kind of unknown outside, and I'd rather not give tips on that. And why I went there, I don't know. Probably got me a little defensive for some reason.
No, that's all right. You know, the thing is about acoustic guitars is my current conception is that because of the physical limitations of the instrument, you have to choose whether you're looking for maximum volume or whether you're going to favor maximum sensitivity with low input. And if you create something for very low input, extreme sensitivity, where you can play with very low action and very articulate so that when you almost breathe on the guitar, it will speak.
We've got those players.
It has an upper threshold where it flattens out and distorts. You know, you don't take that guitar with a 2 millimeter or 3 millimeter Tortex pick and drive it to keep up with the banjo, you know? And so you can also tune your guitar, your voicing and your, amplitude, however you want to talk about the movement of the guitar, so that you get maximum upper threshold. But when doing
That's
so,
almost like changing the tensions, right? On
you
the balance of tensions.
Yeah, but by doing so, you reduce how quickly it responds with minimum input. It needs a little more movement to get it going at that point in time. At least that's how I think about it. Do you agree with that?
We'll follow
assertion?
This same thing.
So we talk about that as a grassroots guitar versus a fingerstyle guitar, right? And they're not the same. And to me, the fingerstyle guitar is made for maximum expression with minimum input, and the bluegrass guitar is made for articulation and maximum volume.
So when let's tie this with our earlier conversation about this reoccurring of the evolution of the shape of the violin and the classic guitar, and they hit this sweet spot, doink, and they stayed there for generations. When people, open tunings have been around forever culturally, but they became a big deal in the U.S. Around the 70s. John Fahey and Wyndham Hill and Will Ackerman, that whole crowd. And when you think of open tunings, of course, you're trying to achieve a chord in the open position, but also you're changing the tension of those strings when you tune them up and you tune them down, and give yourself enough time. People would gravitate towards the optimal combination of tensions, as well as the benefits of our open tuning. Let's say if you did. So one thing I didn't talk about in our string design is if your guitar, you track your guitar because the EQ was just right for you, and you change your brand of strings, you're going to get a different EQ, because that 22 string, let's pick a woman, that 56 string that you put on your guitar from different brands can vary as much as 10 pounds in tension, and that variance in tension is going to change your volume, and it's relative volume that creates your EQ. So where you had a really perfect bass for your genre of playing, volume of bass, now it's either too loud or it's not there, and you don't know what happened to your guitar. The let's call it balanced tensions in the strings allow the guitar to have its true EQ and true voice, and you can repeat it consistently with that. So that's important to a lot of players, and they don't even know it. They don't know that they've chosen the guitar partly because it has the right EQ for it. So that's a big part of this. When we say gauge means nothing, tension means everything, it's a cute attention-seeking device to get people to ask us a deeper question. Yeah, what did this do for my guitar? Oh, no, I've given you a headache.
No, I'm thinking through the sort of Pythagorean proposition that a given string at a particular gauge and a particular tension always rings through at the same note. But you're saying that
I didn't mention note.
Pounds of tension.
Yeah, I was saying that at the same. Oh yeah, the same note. You tune it up to pitch. Let's see, that's E, right? And it's going to be varying tensions depending on the choices of the manufacturer. And there's no standard in the industry for what is right or wrong on that. So different companies do different things for whatever marketing reasons they do, but it's not, that wasn't your choice.
No, I'm just thinking about the possibility of it being able to be at a different tension and achieving the same note.
Well, you'd have to make it tighter or looser to do that. That's how you get that variance. You bring it up to pitch. When you put your string on and you put a little tension on it, it's not ringing at an E, but when you bring it up to the proper tension, it is.
Mm-hmm. But you're saying the tension can vary by 10 pounds on your E string.
It would
and
take
still be in
less tension to bring it up to that pitch.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay.
So I get what you're asking, and it's frightening because it's really evocative. I mean, the premise of our strings is faulty. Well, I know it's not because we've done enough analysis and beta testing to know we're achieving our result. But I don't know how to answer your question. But you can be sure I'll have an answer next time we talk.
Well, that's all right. I'm going to look into it myself. You know, I don't have these conversations so I can say all the stuff I already know. I'm hoping to learn something.
Amen. Amen. Yeah. It's sometimes I have to remind people I'm not being evocative or contentious. I'm as much arguing with myself as I am anybody else. I want to know, and most importantly, if I'm saying something, there's an obligation to being an old dude. If you've done the same thing over and over again, people give you expert status and they expect to get quality information from you. And I made a promise to myself and oftentimes to audiences is that I'll give you what I know based on acoustic physics, sometimes proven scientific inquiry where we've done something over and over again in proper scientific method. But I won't give you an opinion until I warn you, right? That's what the internet is for. So I'm really careful with that. Sometimes I get excited and I could overstep. But I like that you poked at that.
Well,
yes, the answer is yes. Why? I got to look into it. Let's find out.
Okay. Let's make a clear distinction here that for me, the things I'm certain of based on my current understanding. But if someone brings me a new piece of information that I find is valid, it must shift my understanding of that current situation. And so, I am certain of this until someone gives me something that makes me uncertain of that scenario, and I choose to buy into the other version of it. And that's what proper understanding of science is. That's why it was very complicated for someone who is as curious and openly disagreeable as I am during the pandemic period, because there was a lot of political narrative that said, don't question this, trust the science. I'm like, there's no such thing as science without question. Like, this is insane. Like, convince me. Show me and convince me. But the idea that I have to not question is the opposite of science. And so we don't need to get into a conversation about the pandemic necessarily or vaccines and viruses, but just the idea that people would promote to stop questioning is always a huge fucking red flag. And it's absolutely not scientific.
I'm very familiar with the cultural phenomenon, but I'm not familiar with that specific argument. I hadn't heard it. It sounds like if that sentence was longer, it might make a little bit more sense, but it sounds kind of dumb to stand alone. What we want to say this is that physics is a laugh riot. There's these contradictions to what you'd think would be common sense or logic. Well, if this, like you were saying, you have to be at the same tension to get that note. Therefore, whatever. I can't answer that. We'll find out. But there are some things like loudness, measurable loudness. You can't just do it with a decibel meter. It's how your human ear perceives it. So thinking of a balanced, even EQ, a balanced volume from each of 6 notes that you play on the strings is more to it than just the volume, and it's counterintuitive. And there's always a couple of scientists that are get credit for that by name, and I'll get to give you that later. But anyway, like I said, physics is a laugh riot. That's why you need scientists to work with. You're going to go into a project like this, and you don't do it intuitively, except the provocation of your intuition, if your experience can really advance your inquiry.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That was kind of English.
Right. So you know what? I haven't dealt much with this topic in the last year, but the first year of this podcast, I dealt a lot with this topic, and I tested a particular theory of mine where I talked about simplifying things as much as possible to
Oh,
prove an understanding. So I was trying to simplify my understanding of sound, and you just talked about perception, and so as simple as I could get was 3 words, and 3 words to help me understand sound. And once I understood that, I understood basically the entire universe, which sounds insane, but
well,
but
it's
hang
all
on.
one woo-woo, don't you know?
If you're willing to hear it, I would love to get your feedback on it.
Oh, please.
So the 3 words that I got this down to was movement, which could also be called energy. But in physics, movement and energy are the same thing. You can just choose which term you want to use. But for our purposes, when talking about the building of an acoustic system, movement is helpful. So I'm going to call energy movement in this case. So movement plus time and perception. So those are the 3 basic elements that result in what we call sound. Now, movement, I say this because once you set energy in motion, you cannot create or destroy energy.
It's the
Basically,
generative
Newtonian.
event, yeah.
Yeah. And so, but what we do is we put energy in motion. Now, time is important because it's how we discuss and measure the movements. 440 movements within 1 second is the A string of a violin. Thank you, Professor Hertz. Right? And so it's movement in time. And time is simply that we agreed the movement started at this point and ended at this point as a measurement. It's useful like an inch or a millimeter or a kilometer or an hour. And so movement in time. And the third part is perception. And the reason that perception cannot be reduced from the equation is that movement in time, when it hits what you just talked about, when it hits our membrane in our ear and is translated to our audio perceptors in our brain, we call that sound. But that same movement in time perceived by the eyeball, we call light. And we measure light by movement in time as well. And the same movement in time is taste and smell and touch. We realize all of our senses are
And
our
reference.
perception. Yeah, all of our senses are our ability to interact and interpret movement in time. And so now when I think about movement in time and perception as it comes to shaping such a thing. So when we smell something, when the cheese is in the fridge, it has a certain amount of pungency, but when we allow it to warm up, it smells stronger to us. Why? Because the molecules are now moving faster and are coming across our palate with more frequency. It is a higher frequency, and we perceive that as a stronger smell or a more pungent smell. When we perceive higher movement or more frequent movement with our eye, it's brighter light, and it's a higher frequency or a higher note or even treble with our ear than it is with a low frequency. Follow me?
Yeah.
So-
There's maybe you come across this. I don't mean to derail your talk here. Is measuring sound with light for the purpose of acoustic amplification is real evocative.
Yes. So it's no different.
ahead.
What we've done is we're experiencing the same phenomena with different methods of perception. It's all just movement measured by time, whether it's light or sound or taste or smell or anything happening in the world, which is why we can see that a tsunami is coming by observing the membrane at the top of our planet. Now, how do we apply this towards our understanding of our particular subject matter of the guitar? So when somebody wants to create more low frequency response, I now think, how do I insert more time into the system? And so inserting time is often by making something less efficient. And so in the case of why does a rosewood back and side sound like it has more low-end frequency than a mid-range, than a mahogany back and side, it's not because rosewood has more fundamental low end. It's because it's a greater obstacle. And so when the string energy moves into the spruce top, it remains in the spruce top because it cannot leave it very efficiently because the rosewood is much denser and more stiff. Therefore, the energy staying in the spruce top gains greater amplitude. And so it drives down further and then comes back up further. And that greater amplitude means there's more time in travel. And because of that, the frequency is lower because the traveling time is greater. So
the frequency is lower. It's a lower note.
Well, it's not necessarily lower. So we're talking about EQing at this point in time. Okay, that sense of a lower frequency. The note is determined by the string tension. So when the top is traveling further, there's more time in there, and every time it pumps, it pushes the connected molecules, the gaseous molecules, against into action, which eventually hit the membrane of our eardrum. And depending on how frequent that movement is, we perceive as a low frequency or a high frequency. So the strings come across as a very high frequency because they are moving with a much smaller amplitude and more frequently hitting our eardrum. And so now we've got the system. And if we change that back and sides from rosewood to mahogany, the energy moves into the mahogany much faster. We say it has a faster attack and less low frequency, more mid-range because it leaves the top faster. The top actually has less amplitude unless you choose to change the top. But given that the top is the same and the bracing is the same, the resistance is the same, the energy will go into the mahogany faster because it's less of an obstacle. It is an affordance. So the energy moves through it.
And so
we can use the rosewood as an obstacle in this case, and switching to mahogany would be to make an affordance. So the energy would leave the system faster. So we have a faster, more articulate guitar, or a guitar that has more of a slower response, but a fuller sound, we might say in layman's terms.
Cedar Creek Custom Case Shop is your premier fretted instrument custom case maker, and we invite you to create a musical instrument case unlike any other, one that's unique to you. Every Cedar Creek custom case is hand-built by highly skilled craftspeople using only select woods, Providence Forge hardware, and premium instrument-friendly materials. At Cedar Creek Custom Case Shop, we are dedicated to helping you design the case of your dreams. Find out more at cedarcreekcases.com.
This space is normally reserved for brands who make stories like this possible, like the Dario and the Cedar Creek Custom Case Shop. If your company belongs in this conversation, let's talk. We partner with brands who value craft, culture, and the quiet power of a well-placed idea.
Ooh, there's so many questions. We're being scientists here. Is it the medium or the density or the stiffness that's resisting that? Because making the back and the sides thicker or leaving them thicker or making them thinner would change that resistance.
That's right. That's an obstacle or an affordance.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So this is why I say mastery of material is more important than the material itself.
Very good.
Because you could affect the same type of resistance by thicker mahogany as you do through a thinner piece of rosewood if you increase enough mahogany to create the same level of resistance. You would get the same sonic effect or very similar sonic effect. Now, bear with me for just one more minute because we're only into the material choice.
Yeah.
The other part that happens.
I want to pause right there. So really important you add that material choice. And just, for our listeners, a piece of rosewood doesn't guarantee anything except it's identifiable by that name by some characteristics. Where it grew, how fast it grew, et cetera, is going to determine its properties, how it affects the sound of the guitar. I used to have a pet piece of Brazilian that grew in low elevation right next to a waterway that was really just like kind of a piece of plantation grown Brazilian rosewood. And it had a really nice old slaty piece of Indian, like about 100 years old. And their properties switched in that regard.
Right.
So
Yeah.
when for again for listeners, the name of the wood guarantees nothing. And
That's
like
right.
you just said, the knowledge and of your materials is critical in getting what you want out of a guitar.
Yeah. So it's going to take me another 2 to 3 minutes to try and get through this part.
Okay, I'll sit up and
once you
shut up.
understand that you're setting energy in motion through the strings and it contacts with the primary membrane through the bridge, the primary membrane being the top of the guitar, which is where most acoustic physics are being studied currently, through the top. Once you understand that what you're doing is obstacles or affordances, now if I want more low frequency, I could also thin the top or the bracing to create less resistance and therefore gain more amplitude and get a lower frequency. If I don't want that, if I want more of a tighter articulation, we won't thin the top membrane as much. But I could get the same effects by lengthening it. And we don't hear guitar...
The lengthening length of the top?
The grain itself, the length of the top itself. So, because if we take the same board, and I will give you a physical example here, Richard, if you look at me. So if we take the same mass here and the same amount of energy and get movement, we'll get a certain amount. But if we lengthen that with the same thickness and hit it here, you'll get actually more movement in it at that point, right? So if you take a 2x4 and tap it at 8 feet long, it'll have one thing. If you shorten it to 3 feet long, it'll have less amplitude and therefore have a higher pitch tone, right? And so the length of grain is a way to affect amplitude as well, if of the same given thickness. And then the next part that you can be talking about is that air volume. And the reason that sound hole, I don't know why it's always basically 4 inches. And I know you make a model where it's not, but primarily it's mostly 4 inches. But the thing is, by changing that aperture, you can substantially change the fundamental pitch of the guitar. And you can do so. And the reason you do it is that once you set that top in motion, you get that air volume moving within the instrument. You reduce how fast it can leave by closing the aperture. And you increase how fast it can leave. You make an affordance by opening up the aperture. So when you close the aperture, you insert time. It takes longer for the same air volume to leave the system, and therefore you lower the pitch. When you open it up, you will increase the pitch because you've made an affordance and the energy can leave faster, the movement. And so when you start to think about things about movement in time, then you say, how can I either insert time or remove time from this particular part of the system to affect the acoustic outcome by the time we perceive it? Is that nuts?
Do you have a line of supplements?
No, I do not.
Now, you know what's hard for me is like I use all those principles in guitar building. The work of Hermann Helmholtz with the size of the aperture in relation to the pitch of the chamber or the airspace in artifact. And I use it in combination with other factors, either to amplify the effect that I want, stand alone, I might not get much of effect, but if I combine that with scalloping my braces, a little more airspace, whatever, I can really work towards boosting the bass in that instrument. So I don't reject anything. Well, I might reject some things here, but for the sake of this, it's not that I reject anything. I just haven't thought of it in those terms. And I'm going to say this.
I've tried to simplify it. So when you're scalloping your braces, you're making an affordance. You are allowing more movement because you've scalloped the brace.
Yeah, understood. Let's finish my statement here. I haven't used those terms. I haven't looked at that side of it. And so I always come back to the same thing. That's really interesting. Is it repeatable? And that's where the definition that's the proof. There's, you can speculate, or you can do the experimentation until you get repeatable results. And we go, okay, that's why we're going to take this vaccine versus drink Clorox. So what you say is pretty consistent with what I know, but it's for my practice way of thinking to get the sound I want in a guitar, it's a skew I don't quite understand. So simple, yeah. I'm just saying, is it right? I don't know. I don't know. That's not the way I'd approach trying to control the EQ in a guitar, which doesn't make my way right at all. But I can get repeatable results.
You need to get more specific.
What's that?
Which you are. You need to get more specific, which you are. But what I have found is that many people have these separate equations for different specific effects. They've acquired the knowledge and they know how to adjust the metrics. But
I completely agree with that.
But they don't have the 30,000 square foot simplified view of why exactly they're doing that.
Yeah.
And so I've tested this with acoustic engineers, with the aerospace engineers with Lamborghini.
Now you're talking.
So we talked about thermal effects with Lamborghini. We talked about acoustic effects. We talked with physicists, mechanical engineers, and so far no one's been able to punch a hole in that simplification.
Well, that's
I'll
really
be very
helpful,
interested to see if you have.
Not because you're not credible to me, but what that bespeaks of is experience, is equates with experimentation. And the only reason I'm in the place I am at this late date is like half a century to be able to make a lot of things that didn't work and then turning to science to have the explanations of it. So sometimes we hear something in a form that we're not used to, and it makes you squinch up your face and go, I don't know. I never thought of it that way. Is that true or not? But that's where science is. And it's a lot of work what you arrived at, and to take the time to vet that with professionals. I commend you, and I'd like to know more about it. However, not because I need another way to explain what I already do with repeatable results. And I don't mean to sound like a snob, but
I think you're right.
Yeah,
to be clear, I think you're right.
At my season of life, I got to pick my battles really carefully. And I'm a guitar maker first and a researcher second. So you do that, I'll do mine, and we'll compare notes. And maybe you can get a shortcut. Here's my goal. Is I want this open source information where anybody that wants to can make the best sounding guitar possible, the rightest sounding guitar possible. And believe it or not, one of my goals is to add to the body of knowledge where somebody could mass produce pretty cheap guitars that sounded really good and played well. Let's get together. I don't want to make those, mind you, but I want it available.
You want it available.
Yeah.
That's a wonderful idea and a wonderful legacy, by the way, if you achieve such a thing. And so thank you, Richard, for your contribution to the guitar community so far and your ongoing efforts to improve it all for all of us. Sincerely.
I would say the same for you. The awareness that you're creating with taking the good stuff around to show people how it can be done. I would dare say there's a percentage of your audience that never seen a really good guitar. You know, they shop in big box stores. They don't realize the quality. I should say, well, let's not be scientists. Let's be guitar players here. The quality of sound possible because they never heard it before, or the playability that's possible, or just the gratification, the inspiration they get from looking at a super well-made thing. And that helps us all.
Yes. You know, that's
I'm
something
proud of you.
that we've all heard. I'm sure you've heard it many times in your life, is this response. I didn't know a guitar could be this good. Right? And I've had the same response for years.
Yeah, I had nothing to compare it to.
You're welcome. And I'm sorry.
Yeah. Oh, that's very, very good. And it is relative. Yeah. I believe it. I spent a lot of my early career trying to explain the concept of what we did. There was no boutique guitar movement, you know.
Yeah.
You wouldn't have a name. It was really hard because people are like, well, Martin's the best guitar. How could you make a better guitar than Martin? Where do you start? You know, you can argue with an opinion, but you can't argue with dumb or ignorant, I should say. People are not, they have no comparative analysis because they ignored the top end of the thing. So it's a beautiful thing. I used to belabor this anecdote with people. I said, we're going on vacation with my wife. This is before cell phones. And she's a graphic and a commercial artist before it was an app. And she'd have her Hasselblad and $4,000 in filters and lenses. And she might take 3 pictures the whole time if the light was right and whatever, and they could all go on the cover of a magazine. And I'd buy these in Europe. They call them a one-way camera, little yellow cardboard camera. You take pictures of how big the fish was. Maybe you caught that girl on the beach with her top off, or whatever's important to you. And if you remembered, you sent it in. You got your pictures back, and we both had the perfect tool for our needs. Right? Like,
Yes.
But it wasn't like, I got a cardboard camera. How could anything be any better?
Yeah.
Yeah, and a certain amount of it is just perception and experience. You just don't know. And some people don't care. I've taken people to restaurants that I think are wonderful restaurants, and they just are not that sensitive to the taste of food, and they just don't really care. And that's okay. And sometimes I have a bit of an envy because
It's cheaper.
I'm really... Well, it's cheaper, but also I feel like they're more content somehow in life than I am. They're less prone to be disappointed, and isn't that wonderful?
That's right. You set yourself up for less disappointment.
Yeah.
Oh man, that's beautiful. I learned a lot from you today.
Well, you've got me thinking about that Hasselblad now, because cameras are a regular part of our conversation here, and people who like fine things, the food, the guitars. Also, you'll find there's a lot of guitar makers who invest in Leicas or Hasselblads, or really the types of cameras that if you just want to take a picture, it's more camera than you need for sure. And it's maybe doesn't even get you the results of the Sony that you could just easily take a shot with, but there's something about the tactile nature of them.
Yeah,
the
really nice
feeling of winding the film or the shutter click. I know that Zach, our tech who's recording this right now, is chomping at the bit because this is actually his passion. As we're talking about this,
does he have his hand raised?
He wants to come in and start talking. I'm sure of it. But there is something about the Hasselblad camera.
She's a Leica gal now.
Oh, well, I got to tell you, there's something about the oddity of the Hasselblad.
Yeah.
That really stimulates me, and I'm really interested in it. And, but Zach, my son, carries around a 1946 Leica and a 51 Rolleiflex. Like, he's into the
Rolleiflex.
Old
the Leica
stuff.
was what the war correspondents and the journalists and stuff hauled around, so it's got a lot of romance to it.
Yes, exactly.
But then you're talking about the guy that got a cardboard camera.
I shoot mostly with my iPhone, and it takes a wonderful picture. And anybody who's gone through old family photos realizes that the cell phone has saved us all from a lot of really awful photographs.
I find peace with an iPhone.
Yeah, exactly. Well, Richard, I've really enjoyed this conversation. As we come to a close here, I always throw it back to my guest and say, Richard, is there a topic that you were thinking we might discuss today, or that you wanted to talk about that I failed to bring up, or another question? I'll send the last bit to you.
That's really kind of you. Thank you. I'd like to take advantage of that. And I've said a few things in our talk today that maybe they were evocative, maybe they weren't, they sound a little silly or whatever. But the premise that I've run the company on is from the beginning, and I kind of said this, the guitar making is a beautiful thing to do as a job or avocation or anything. But that's not what we make. What we're making is we're making the world a better place. We're making a tool that allows somebody the best possible chance of expressing their creativity without limit. Music is a universal language. It makes the world a better place. The more music, the better off we are. Secrets avail us nothing. The only thing I'd consider keeping in confidence is something might harm somebody else. But information about what we do, and I'm not kidding, there's maybe I don't want to engage in conversation with somebody that's not serious sometimes, but I wouldn't withhold information to another maker that's looking to advance their career and our cause. So I do want to invite people. I'm probably more accessible than you think. To share some of that knowledge or direct people to that. I think it's a beautiful thing to do, and it's a great group of people. And there was a long hiatus. When undoubtedly part of what I started doing in the late '60s, early '70s was part of the arts and crafts revival, where we discovered, hey, we don't have to buy into the myth of the '60s specialization. We can make our own clothes and shoes and instruments and candles and leather goods and woodwork and on and on and on. And from that came the whole tech movement. So, and we desperately needed each other. And I think this, along with my faith and my belief and sharing, that this is what started this movement that we know today in the boutique guitar movement. We desperately needed each other back then because nobody knew what they were doing, and the big companies wouldn't talk to us. So we were on the phone, developed the Guild of American Luthiers, later the American String Instrument Artisans, etc. And it was a wonderful sharing group of people. As we either dropped out of the business to get a real job and raise kids, or we gained some success in our businesses like us, we no longer needed each other so desperately. We still stayed friends, but that get-together fell off for like maybe a decade or two. And now it's coming back. We're getting together, we're gathering again, and I feel a whole new fresh wind blowing. And I know there's people out there very protective of some secrets, and I respect your context, but I want to remind people that that doing really good work, doing the best you can, treating people right is probably the biggest key to success. So there you go.
Wonderfully put.
And
Richard,
lots of it.
Yes. So for our listeners, Richard and I are going to talk for just another 2 or 3 minutes about the business of guitar. Now, we put that behind a paywall because then we can talk about stuff that the public can't hear about, to be honest. So if you're in the guitar business and you want to hear what Richard and I have to say from a man who has almost 50 years in the guitar business experience, please join us at patreon.com/businessofguitar.com, patreon.com/businessguitar. And Richard and I will continue over there. But for now, let's say goodbye.
Good job,
Thank you,
boss.
Richard.
Proud of you. Thank you.
Take care. Bye. Okay, don't leave. All right. So, Richard, thank you for staying on for the extended edition of Life with Strings Attached, the business of guitar. Now, this is a section where we hope to just get one little pearl of wisdom from people, from their unique approach. If you had one bit of advice to give to someone else in the guitar business, perhaps a lesson that you wished you had maybe learned earlier, what would you contribute?
I know what it is. Let's see what few words I can put this into. It's a variation of our, popular rendition of the Golden Rule. But I'm going to vary it, mix it up a little bit. It's empathy. It's empathy for one another, and it's accept each other with the same forgiveness and grace you forgive yourself. We've all done despicable things, intentionally or otherwise, but we find a way to forgive ourselves because we understand the circumstances that had us arrive to that decision, and usually we'll get over it. Is to have that same empathy for your fellow person and realize you have no idea what burden the next person bears, where they're coming from. But a pause, a commitment to not take it personally, and then decide if you want to continue on or not. That's the principle that's made us successful, that's allowed us to be respected and trusted. And as one of my mentors, and I've had a few, Jim Patterson, he wrote this seminal book on pearl inlay back in 108 years ago. He said, treat people right. It works every time.
Wonderful. Thank you, Richard. And might I add that I have seen this in you from my earliest recollection of you. Despite the fact that we're both in North America, my first recollections were people saying kind things about this guy named Richard Hoover of Santa Cruz Guitars around the Music Messe in Frankfurt. Different guitar makers like our friend Nick Huber or Claudio Pagelli or so that just made a comment that Richard Hoover came by and how kind he was and how helpful he was in just sort of talking and very open at a time when there was a time where the guild system simply lived on longer in Germany and Europe than it did in North America. And that I can attest that you're not just talking it, but you've walked it. And so thank you again.
I feel smarter already. Thanks, brother.
Thank you, Richard. Thanks for being on the show. Until next time.
My pleasure.
Bye for now. You've been listening to Life with Strings Attached. If today's conversation meant something to you, consider passing it on. These stories find their place through the people who share them. A new episode comes out every Friday, right here, wherever you're listening. I'm Jamie Gale, and thanks for listening to Life with Strings Attached.